Welcome to College Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: this enfant terrible was too radical for Elgar, now he's ripe for revival. Skilled construction worker shortage a huge hurdle for housing plan. Ruth Hegarty lived through a cruel chapter in Australia's history, but she now has a message of hope. The high school mobile phone ban starts this week. This is how it will work. City of Sydney has $800 million in the bank. One councillor wants to use it for new homes. This enfant terrible was too radical for Elgar, now he's ripe for revival. Telegraph. The recent publication of Paul Spicer's biography of Arthur Bliss, Standing Out from the Crowd, invites readers to reconsider the work of this talented composer. Bliss was educated at Cambridge and the Royal College of Music, where he was taught by Perry, Vaughan Williams, and Holst. His experiences in World War I had a lasting impact on him, leading to the composition of his choral symphony Morning Heroes. Although Bliss's work was initially considered modern and innovative, he fell out of favor with the arrival of Walton and Britten. However, his music is now being rediscovered and appreciated once again. Skilled construction worker shortage a huge hurdle for housing plan. The Sydney Morning Herald. Construction experts and economists have warned that Victoria's construction workforce is too small to meet the state government's target of building 80,000 homes per year. The government may need to pause major infrastructure projects and increase its skilled migrant intake to achieve its goal. The number of workers employed in construction has dropped substantially in recent months, and experts believe that the current workforce will be unable to meet the increased demand. They suggest that the government needs to incentivize young people to join the construction industry and increase the number of immigrants with construction skills. Ruth Hegarty lived through a cruel chapter in Australia's history, but she now has a message of hope. ABC. Ruth Hegarty, a 94-year-old Aboriginal woman, has shared her story of being forcibly removed from her family and raised in a government-run Aboriginal mission in Queensland as the nation approaches a historic vote on voice for Indigenous Australians. Hegarty was separated from her mother at the age of 4 and lived in a dormitory where every aspect of her family's life was restricted and controlled by the state. Aboriginal people from numerous clans and tribes across Queensland and northern New South Wales were moved to Cherbourg, sometimes forcibly, under the Aboriginal Protection Act. Hegarty has campaigned for change and is an advocate for truth-telling and the importance of education for Indigenous Australians. She is the only remaining person from a photograph of Aboriginal girls taken at the mission. Hegarty has helped her daughter run information sessions for the Yes campaign ahead of the vote, and while she is optimistic about the outcome, she says that if the vote fails, it will be a time of mourning. The high school mobile phone ban starts this week. This is how it will work. The Sydney Morning Herald. A blanket ban on mobile phones in NSW public high schools will be rolled out from Monday, but the nation's peak mental health research organization has raised concern about the decision, saying there is a lack of scientific evidence for the move. The rules for implementing the ban will vary depending on the school, and some have already taken steps to cushion the blow for a generation of teenagers who have spent their high school years on smartphones and to assure parents they can still pass on messages via the office. In April, Premier Chris Minns announced that a compulsory ban on phones in NSW high schools, a key election promise, would take effect from day 1 of Term 4, insisting that young people would be at risk of declining educational results without it. This will affect over 400 schools across the state, he said at the time. Upwards of 320,000 students will be caught up in this ban. We believe that it's necessary when you look at other states across Australia that have implemented a similar ban. The Black Dog Institute has published a discussion paper questioning the value of mobile phone bans in schools ahead of its Digital Mental Health Policy Forum in Canberra this month. City of Sydney has $800 million in the bank. One councillor wants to use it for new homes. The Sydney Morning Herald. A Greens councillor in Sydney has called on the City of Sydney to spend at least 25% of the $817.5 million Australian dollars, $604 million, it has in the bank to purchase affordable housing. The council has backed away from its target of achieving 15% affordable and social housing by 2036, calling the target aspirational. The councillor's report said the council forecast an operating surplus of 100 million Australian dollars per year for the next decade and had at least 220 million Australian dollars in cash that it doesn't have any plan for. Will Jacinta Allen be a good premier? The telltale signs are already showing. The Sydney Morning Herald. Jacinta Allen, the new Premier of Victoria, Australia, is expected to be a more collegial leader than her predecessor, Daniel Andrews, according to Paul Strangeau, Emeritus Professor of Politics at Monash University. Allen's less domineering approach is likely to be welcomed by the public, who may have grown tired of Andrews' leadership style. Strangeau also notes that Allen's commitment to community engagement and equality of opportunity suggests continuity with her political philosophy established in 1999. One of Allen's policy priorities will be progressing treaty making with Victoria's Indigenous communities. Jim sneezed. Then his arm went numb. The Sydney Morning Herald. Professor Jim Elliott, a leading researcher on neck pain and whiplash, recently found himself on the operating table after sustaining a neck injury from a sneeze. Elliott, who has authored over 200 peer-reviewed articles on the topic, had an immediate nerve jolt down his right arm after the sneeze, followed by tingling and numbness. The injury led to a diagnosis of severe multilevel foraminal stenosis, and Elliott underwent an anterior cervical disc fusion to relieve the pressure on the nerve. Elliott's experience has given him a new appreciation for patients' input in clinical care and research. Family loses everything in tumble dryer fire. BBC. A family in Oxford escaped a devastating fire in their flat caused by a tumble dryer. Fire crews arrived at the property to find flames coming out of the kitchen window. The mother and her 3 children, including an infant girl and boys aged 5 and 12, managed to evacuate the property quickly. The family has lost everything in the fire, and an online fundraising page has been set up to support them. Fire officers praised the family for their quick evacuation and reminded everyone to test their smoke alarms regularly. Canada's dramatic summer weather has altered the fall colors this year, researchers. The Toronto Star. Researchers in Canada say that the unusual summer weather experienced across the country this year is affecting the fall colors of the trees. In Nova Scotia, for example, where the summer started with forest fires and ended with stormy weather, the vibrant reds and oranges normally seen this time of year have been replaced with duller brown colors. In Ontario, however, trees are displaying their natural pigments earlier than usual, which could be due to the smoke from wildfires in the region triggering the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6-degree world, here to bring you the latest news and insights. Let's dive right in. First up, we have the rediscovery of a talented composer, Arthur Bliss. Initially considered too radical for Elgar, Bliss's work is now being appreciated once again. It goes to show that sometimes, true talent takes time to be recognized. Next, we have a huge hurdle in Victoria's housing plan. The shortage of skilled construction workers is posing a challenge to the government's goal of building 80,000 homes per year. It seems like the government may need to get creative, perhaps by incentivizing young people to join the industry or increasing the number of skilled immigrants. In a more somber story, we hear from Ruth Hegarty, a 94-year-old Aboriginal woman who lived through a cruel chapter in Australia's history. She was forcibly removed from her family and raised in a government-run Aboriginal mission. As the nation approaches a historic vote on voice for Indigenous Australians, Hegarty has become an advocate for change, truth-telling, and education for Indigenous Australians. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of confronting and learning from the past. Moving on to education, a blanket ban on mobile phones in NSW public high schools has been rolled out. While some experts have raised concerns about the lack of scientific evidence for the move, the government believes it is necessary to improve educational outcomes. It will be interesting to see how this ban plays out and whether it has any positive impact on students' learning. Shifting gears to Sydney, we have a Greens councillor calling for the City of Sydney to use its substantial financial resources to purchase affordable housing. With $800 million in the bank, it seems like a sensible proposal. After all, what better way to use the money than to provide housing for those who need it most? In the world of politics, Jacinta Allen, the new Premier of Victoria, is expected to be a more collegial leader than her predecessor. This change in leadership style could be a breath of fresh air for the public. Allen's commitment to community engagement and equality of opportunity also signals a promising political philosophy. Now, let's take a moment to acknowledge Professor Jim Elliott, who experienced a life-changing injury from a mere sneeze. As a leading researcher on neck pain and whiplash, his own personal experience has given him a new appreciation for patients' input in clinical care and research. It just goes to show that even experts can find themselves on the other side of the table. In the world of sports, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey attended the Texas-Oklahoma game, marking the first time he watched the rivalry game that will soon be part of his league. It seems like Sankey wanted to savor the game as a fan before it becomes a conference game. And who can blame him? College football rivalries are always a sight to behold. In some unfortunate news, a family in Oxford escaped a devastating fire caused by a tumble dryer. Thankfully, they managed to evacuate the property quickly, but they have lost everything. It's a reminder for all of us to regularly test our smoke alarms and stay vigilant about potential fire hazards. Lastly, we have the impact of Canada's dramatic summer weather on the fall colors of trees. Unusual weather patterns have led to changes in the vibrancy and timing of the colors. It's a fascinating reminder of how interconnected nature's elements can be. And there you have it, folks. A whirlwind of news from around the world. Now, it's your turn to join the discussion. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any questions or insights to share? Let's hear what you have to say. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.